So good afternoon, bienvenue. My name is Anja Geitmann. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, and on behalf of the faculty, but also of the other two faculties involved in this project, in their respective deans, Dean Jim Neisel and Dean Bruce Lennox, I welcome you here to this official launch event of the McGill Sustainability Systems Initiative. Today you will have a really interesting program. We will start off with a few words of mine, addition on top of what I'm doing right now. And then we have the core part of the event, and that is the actual launch of the three core first grand themes and the presentation of what these themes are about. Then following this, you will have the opportunity to actually ask questions, and I would like to highlight that we are live streaming this to McDonald campus. So I'm here sort of split. I cloned myself. The other part is out at McDonald campus. Now I was actually supposed to be at McDonald campus. And so we say hello to them. And unfortunately, this is a one-way stream only, and their way to return questions or comments will be by Twitter or by email. I will give indications later on, so welcome to McDonald campus. And following that, we will have a guest speaker. And today's guest speaker is Dr. Amy Lewers, who is the brand new Executive Director of Future Earth. Following that speech, we will have a wine and cheese and give you the opportunity to mingle and talk to our presenters, but also talk to each other, as it is most important that we actually get together and exchange our ideas. To start with, I would like to acknowledge that we are here on the traditional territory of the Kanien'ke Hakka. And I would like to emphasize the fact that this is an initiative that was really born from a vision and an opportunity. On a disconcertingly warm day, such as this one today, after an incredibly devastating hurricane season, not even behind us, still ongoing, it's one of those days when you realize that we really need to change things. And in order to change things, we need to think ahead. And this is exactly what I think our senior administrative leadership thought when the opportunity arose to inject internal funding into a project that was close to their heart. And I'm underlining here the presence of said leadership. We thank Professor Suzanne Fortier, the principal, of being here, the provost, Chris Manfredi, as well as the VP Communications, Louis Arsenault. Thanks a lot for taking the time to be here and join us in this. And so the vision that originated from the originally called Sustainability, Sciences and Technologies Initiative arose from the need of universities to take the leadership in how we take society forward. Innovation is all fine and good, and it arises from creativity, but unless we think about what innovative action does to the future, we're not contributing to a sustainable future. And so this opportunity through internal funding to actually work on this on many fronts was the challenge that was put in front of us of the three deans, the faculties of engineering, of science, and agriculture and environmental sciences, with a goal to be lofty, to develop something unique, but also impactful. And that was quite a challenge because we had to now come up with an idea. How are we going to use this internal funding, put it to a use that goes beyond just doing a little bit more of what we do already, right? It would be really easy to distribute this money over all of us, and that way everybody could get another PhD student and they could just continue working on what they do. But that was not the point. The point was to create synergy by putting all these bright minds in one room that we have at this university. Even more importantly, the bright minds that didn't even know each other beforehand, or even worse, that didn't even know existed. So many of my colleagues out at MAC wouldn't even know that in chemistry we have a young professor working in green chemistry when we have similar efforts out at MAC, and by getting now these people together we get the synergy, and that was the whole point. The goal that we were presented with was lofty in a sense, so we were not supposed to create another internal funding agency. We're not supposed to just amplify something that we're doing already. We're supposed to create something that didn't exist before and that we can now use to actually leverage to the outside in order to attract even more investment and funding. And so you can imagine that this was a process that was actually not so easy. Even between only the three of us, the three deans of us, we were not always aligned in terms of how we would actually put this on the table. But eventually, you see the first result here. We have chosen 3 themes. We have sourced ideas for these themes from the entire community. We have looked at these themes, we have asked the people, we have analyzed how can we use these different ideas to leverage. And we ended up by choosing a first set of 3 themes that we think could make a difference in how McGill goes forward in terms of research that contributes to sustainability research and system, but also in order to leverage our brain capacity. The combined great brain capacity, not only in this room, but at the university is fantastic. All we need to do is actually get it together in one room and work together. So this is how this came to pass. The first 3 themes will not be the only ones. There will be further calls for grand ideas. And so those sitting in the room who don't feel yet included in these, there will be more opportunities to actually realize your ideas. Without further ado, I would like now to actually give the words to the originators of these ideas. And the first word will go to the group that is called Sustainable Materials. The leaders or the individuals that we identified as the potential leaders of this theme are Dr. Audrey Morris and Dr. George Dimopoulos, as well as Dr. Neil Basu, who's not able to be here since on sabbatical. And so I would invite the 2 of you or your speaker to actually present us with the ideas you have. Before we go forward, so I will actually give the 3 themes the opportunity to speak in a row, and then at the end we will have a question period. That will allow us to more efficiently involve the people sitting out at the McDonald campus to send in their questions. So following the 3 presentations, we will have a question period for all presenters. Please.
So welcome everyone to the launch of the MSSI initiative here at McGill. It's a great pleasure to be here to introduce some of our work to launching the materials theme that will be within this initiative. So Anya mentioned the challenge that the Dean had thinking about how to change the way we practice things and change the way we are thinking about the grand challenge of sustainability. So my colleagues George, Neil, and I were tasked with trying to find a mechanism to doing this, and I'll try to show you what we came up with in this framework. So our grand challenge here is to recognize, in fact, a contradiction that we're in, that the society demands that we create constantly novel materials to address the needs of the society, to address the fact that we're facing major challenges in terms of energy, global warming, or just living our lives, food, health. However, one of the big problems is that it's been recognized that some of these materials later down the road leave a legacy and cause pollution, toxicity, and we only realize this much later, when it's too late, when they've already done a lot of damage, and everybody also has gotten used to the technologies and the way they function that has created the problem to begin with. So what we recognize is that a way to move forward is to actually have a mechanism for assessing the risk associated with any material way before we actually release it for consumption and way before it's actually widely spread. So the idea is to integrate this assessment of risk within the phases of design, synthesis, development, and use. And in fact, during the whole lifetime of the material, to start to think about the material that we make in our labs as a a system that is going to have its own life, from the resources that we mine in order to make it all the way to the disposal and the release in the environment after its use. So in order to do this, we have actually taken the scheme of how we make materials, we design them, we develop them, and we find applications and eventually use them. And we've decided to add this idea of assessing them throughout their whole life cycle to try to have an evaluation of the risk. However, doing this is really complicated. It really requires that we talk about toxicity, environmental faith, life cycle analysis, social acceptance, regulatory framework, and I'm missing a bunch here, but you get my point. There's a lot of people that we need to have around the table when we start to do this. It's no longer just us in our little lab trying to make a material. It's a whole conversation with colleagues across the whole campus. And our goal is really to add this last piece, which is to integrate evaluation within the discovery mechanism so that the next generation materials will be inherently safer. So this is, of course, a big challenge, and we separated our research into 3 axes. One is this idea of inventing new materials and integrating the lessons of assessments and toxicity and evaluation and environmental fate within the design. The second one is to develop a platform in order to have widespread, rapid throughput assessment of emerging materials. And the last one is to involve stakeholders so that everything that we do is driven by the society, the governments, and the companies that are in need of the materials that we're talking about. In order to get started, because this is really nice and very blue sky, we decided to focus on a small number of materials. And we chose them because of some of the expertise that we had on campus, but more importantly, because they're emerging technologies that are in the realm of sustainability already. So one is the field of energy materials, such as lithium batteries, photovoltaics, or photocatalytic solar fuels. And the other one is the field of nanomaterials, which are, we all know, already integrated in consumer products. They are emerging materials for energy catalysis remediation applications, and things like Q-dots, nano carbon materials, 2D materials are going to be the kinds of materials that we would like to work on in order to develop this framework of benign by design materials. So the way we wanted to work for this, it was very complicated because, as Anya said, we want to do things in a new way so that it's really going to lead to breakthroughs in this field. We needed to have more expertise. Just the 3 of us, George, Neil, and I, we chatted a lot over the summer, and we said, oh, but how are we going to do this? We miss this expertise and that expertise. So what we decided to do was to assemble a team around us who have, we think, the key skills so that we could start to map the problem with the required answers that we could find. So the team is here. So we gathered around us 9 other people. So we're now a team of 12 people. There's Steve McGuire from the Faculty of Management, Jay Ellis from the Faculty of Law, Barbara Hales from the Department of Pharmacology, Thomas Africhis from Chemistry, Nicholas Privatis from Physics, Subesis Ghoshal from Civil Engineering, Peter Gruder from Physics, Sylvain Coulomb from Chemical Engineering, and Dima Peripishke from Chemistry. So by doing this, we really map what we think is a good representation of the campus with people from a large number of different departments. And what this allows us to draw is a number of skill sets and tools in order to meet the grand challenge that we're facing. So with this in mind, we would like as well our team to be connected with a number of other stakeholders which are key for the success of this initiative. We're going to partner with business, consumers, community, governments, in order to make sure that we're in a position to really tackle the toxicity, environmental fates, life cycle analysis, social acceptance, and regulatory framework of the materials that we are going to study. So finally, I'm sure some of you want to know how to get more involved. So the way we're going to direct our efforts is that all the resources of the theme is going to be towards collaboration, and only with collaboration across the campus. So we're not going to allow two persons who are in the same department, have collaborated for many years, to collaborate together. It will be research following the vision that I described. Again, as Professor Gateman mentioned, there's going to be other initiatives. If you feel that you can contribute to sustainability other ways, hopefully new themes are going to emerge in the next few years. And also, it has to be in the framework of the MSSI Grand Challenge. So if you feel that you can contribute to the program as we have presented it with my colleague George and Neil, who's unfortunately not around, you can reach out to us or any of the co-PIs that I mentioned with an idea of how you can concretely provide some expertise in order to address the challenge that I expressed. George, would you like to maybe add a few words?
Maybe 2 words.
Yeah, go for it.
If I may add.
Yeah.
Beyond the specific materials that we have identified to work, what we want to introduce is a new way of collaboration, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. We want to break the barriers of collaboration that is not there as much as we want. And in this way, train our new generation of researchers, the PhD students, the postdoctoral fellows, even the undergraduate students, into a new concept of work, because out there, the things are not in isolated boxes, but everything interacts with each other. So we have to learn to work as researchers in this new environment. And this is a great opportunity with this initiative. That's the training aspect and the new value added into that. I think it's a big plus with this initiative.
Thank you very much, Professors Morris and Dimopoulos. I think this illustrates what we really wanted to achieve here, not only science and technology, but really systems and getting the other disciplines into such a theme. I'm going to proceed directly with the second theme, sustaining landscapes for the future. The leads that we have identified for this theme are Professor Lakshmi Sushima, Professor Brian Robinson, and Professor Elena Bennett, who is out at McDonald campus. So one of you two will present.
Thank you. I'm going to start off here, and then I'll hand it over to Lakshmi midway through. So I'm really excited to be here and really excited to talk to you about the launch of the Sustainable Landscapes Initiative here at McGill through this program. And when you think about landscapes, you think, well, okay, why is landscapes? Why am I excited about this? Why am I passionate about it? And I really think landscapes is kind of this unique perspective and scale of analysis. It's almost this Goldilocks scale, right? Like it's bigger than a plot scale, which is maybe where individuals usually make singular decisions, but it's also a lot smaller than, say, a national scale where maybe you have tangible problems, but they often get boiled down into aggregate statistics, right? And so landscapes present this perspective where you can really think about problems and think about solutions to problems and how to maybe enact them, right? And so that's why I'm really passionate about thinking about, well, sustainable landscapes. And it also allows us to think about how to take people from a range of disciplines, really leverage the expertise that is here at McGill to bring together applied work, policy work, and try to better understand the systems that we want to affect. Okay, so we have a large sort of framework diagram here. I'm not going to go through this at all in detail, but I want to zoom in on a couple of points here. So the vision that we have for this theme is to identify and facilitate opportunities to create equitable and sustainable landscapes, right? So that's what we're trying to work towards, right? And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. There are 3 core project areas that we've identified in which we want to try to enact that vision. Okay, so first, we're focused on projects that look at landscapes of production, okay, asking questions about how can we produce goods more sustainably. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail in just a second, okay? Second, northern landscapes. How can we identify more sustainable pathways or sustainable pathways for Canada's north? And then finally, thinking about landscapes in transition. What are some sustainable transitions that can apply in very dynamic regions? And I'm thinking about economically dynamic regions, developing areas, places that are resource poor, that are moving into maybe higher income levels. How do we set those transitions in those places on a sustainable pathway? Okay, so these are the core project areas that we see this theme playing in. And each of those, go back here, each of these core project areas operate from the perspective of sustainability science. So it's implicit that integrated into each of these project areas are perspectives of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Okay. We also have cross-cutting features that we hope to see operate within each of these project spaces. So we hope to try to co-produce some of the research questions that we have with policymakers. What are the most pressing needs and challenges that we have in our current landscape right now, and how can we, as a community, help address some of those? Those are maybe more medium-term goals. Those aren't going to be right off the bat, right? We have outreach efforts. We'll hold science shops. People can come into McGill, ask questions or workshop around specific issues, leadership training, doing web and social media outreach. But we also hope to integrate tools and ways of helping solve these problems. So these could be models or decision support systems, right? But we want to integrate these into all of the project areas that we're doing. So landscapes of production, what do I mean by that? So any landscape that we manage for extraction or consumption by society is a landscape of production. And so these could be things like agriculture, mining, timber extraction. And typically we manage these individual landscapes very well for one specific metric, right? So agriculture, we produce yields very well, and we're still increasing yields, and we need to keep increasing yields, right? Mining, we extract materials. But rarely do we try to measure them or manage them for more than just one metric. And so part of what we want to think about here in this landscapes of production are what are some of the other metrics that we might want to measure across the landscapes? And then what are some tools that we might be able to bring to bear that help us do that in a more integrated way? And hopefully, if we are able to address some of these interactions, this helps lead towards more sustainable landscape interactions. So landscapes in transition. So this is more of a thinking from a development perspective. And leveraging some of that expertise here at McGill. But thinking about in these transitioning areas, there's lots of social changes happening, a lot of social issues that need to be addressed, but there are also a lot of climate or environmental vulnerabilities that exist as well, right? And these are all happening in the midst of dramatic economic and institutional changes. And so in these kinds of landscapes, there might be things that happen in one place dramatically could affect things that happen in another, or even across various countries. And so we want to look at these interactions among landscapes, things that might affect livelihood strategies or migration patterns, or how coordinated policy might lead to more sustainable outcomes in some of these landscapes. And to pick up on the last core area, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Shibu. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'm Lakshmi Sushma. I am with the Civil Engineering Department and TICET. So I'm going to be talking about the other area that we are going to be focusing on within the landscapes theme. This is the northern landscapes. So it's a good idea to get started with the definition of what is northern. Here in Montreal, we are north, but we decided to focus on the Arctic and the subarctic regions, that's to say 50 degrees, north of 50 parallel. So that said, it's a very dynamic boundary. We may decide to push this boundary further south such that we can look at other interesting questions and technology, and also do some integrative projects with other themes such as the urban that's going to be presented following this one. So there are lots of changes happening in the northern landscapes. So we have to first of all think about climate. The figure that I've put up there is actually showing you the permafrost degradation for different scenarios. So what you see up there in red and orange are the regions that would be where permafrost would have completely degraded when the global mean temperatures increased by 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius respectively compared to the pre-industrial climate. So this is going to have socioeconomic and going to impact the socioeconomic and eco-environmental systems. So infrastructure is already being affected. So we have to take all these considerations into any planning that we make. Not only that, there are other changes that's happening in the north. You have vegetation migrating north as a result of a warmer climate. You have retreating glaciers. What you see in these two panels, the top one is showing you the glacier fractions in current climates, and the bottom panel is telling you what might be the glacier fraction, say, in future climate, that's to say by the end of the century. And all this is going to have an impact on the hydrology, the climate, etc., and we have to consider all that. Not to mention changing extremes. Today is a good day to talk about that, I think. So what I've shown up there are projected changes to the number of hot days for summer, during summer, and this is corresponding to a particular scenario. This is one of the extreme scenarios, and you do see that the temperatures, the number of hot days is increasing by as much as 45 to 60 during summer. So these are important changes, and we have to consider all these when we are thinking about sustainability in the north. So with that background information, I'm going to talk about sustainable northern landscapes and what we plan to do within this MSSI. So initially, as I mentioned, we focus a lot on northern climate and land dynamics. How we are going to do this a bit differently is that usually we use a regional Earth system modeling approach. What we plan to do is to bring in human dimensions as well. This is not very often done. So once we integrate this, we'll look at the feedback between components of the Earth system. We'll pay special attention to look at extreme weather and climates. We'll be looking at natural resources such as water, wind resources, as well as solar radiation, because these are all important sources of renewable energy. So the information that we get from these studies will feed into northern engineering, I should say northern sustainable engineering. So what we are targeting for are reliable, sustainable, and resilient engineering strategies. So there are a lot of things you could do, but we decided to identify 3 sectors to get started with. That said, there's plenty of room to consider other sectors as well. This is going to be energy, infrastructure, and mining. So energy, within this sector, what we plan to do is to look for sustainable energy solutions for Canada's north and northern communities in particular. Northern communities are relying on fossil-based fuel, which is not only expensive, but it is also a point source of greenhouse gases. We look into the feasibility, mostly in terms of, how costly this is to integrate into the system, etc. Now, I forgot to mention, not all of this research we have to get started from scratch. There are already networks and projects that are doing this, so we might, benefit from some of these networks that's ongoing. Not to mention here, there is an NSEC Hydro-Quebec Research Chair in renewable energy here at MECL, so we could benefit from some of those existing programs. I do mention the second item as infrastructure. So by infrastructure, I mean buildings, transportation. I've indicated safe water. What I mean by that is water and wastewater treatment plants and things along those lines. So we try to improve design, come up with sustainable design and new technology such that we can have sustainable infrastructure in these northern latitudes. The third item there is mining, and what we are going to work towards is to reduce the footprint of these mining activities in the north, and this will be done mostly through the development of new technologies and also through climate change informed decision making. So another important factor is the social aspect that comes in. So we have to take into account the social priorities. This is something we have to still develop on. So anybody in the audience, if you're interested along these lines, please get in touch with us. So bringing all these 3 different factors together, that's science, engineering, and the social sciences, that's going to be a powerful integration that we are targeting for. And this is towards the co-production of knowledge and technology related to sustainability. So what do projects look like? Brian already gave an idea. So what we plan is to bring together, like all the other themes, expertise, and know-how across McGill to contribute to this initiative. Definitely there is a tremendous richness to be gained from leveraging all expertise and perspectives. There's going to be plenty of room for integrative and interdisciplinary research and education. To make this program a success, of course, we have to think about short-term goals, medium-term, and long-term goals. So short-term goals, we designed some activities within each core project area to benefit from existing projects and networks. We target for some precision white papers on sector-based sustainable science and technology. So we aim for some joint papers that would come out right away in the first year of this program. There's medium to long-term goals. We have to carefully design these activities, and they will eventually lead to innovation and integrated smart tools, which is going to be the legacy, at least from the landscapes team and also for the MSSI. And the ultimate goal is also to inform policy. So I think with that, I'll ask the next team to come forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Robinson and Sushma. And I'll turn over directly the podium to Andy Gonzalez, who is one of the leads of the last theme that we'll be presenting today, and that will be adapting urban environments for the futures. The co-leads of that theme are David Waxmuth, here I believe, and Kevin Minot.
Thank you, Anya. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm incredibly excited. Are you excited today to be here? This is the McGill Sustainability Systems Initiative. I haven't seen anything like this at McGill since I joined in 2003. We're at the dawn of a completely new way of doing research at McGill, I think. That's what's happening today. It's about coalescing a nascent, latent network of researchers who are all concerned about the issue, the challenges of the 21st century. The buzzword is sustainability today, and we're worried about how the planet will be 100 years from now as our global human population goes through a massive demographic transition, comes away from exponential growth, stabilizes to a new population, who knows where, 9, 11 billion. And during that time, cities are going to be the crucible of that change. And we need to keep them at the very focus of our research agenda for sustainability systems. Our theme is adapting urban environments for the future. And I have the distinct pleasure and honor to work with two other colleagues, Kevin Minot, who will join us in a few minutes when he's done teaching, and David Waxmuth, who will tag team with me in a few short moments to give you his take on the latter half of our talk. I've been told many times that natural scientists cannot talk to social scientists and vice versa. We don't speak the same language. I can tell you that that is wrong. We have an amazing rapport, the three of us, and I think it's testimony to the cross-cutting nature of the problem of urban sustainability that we can have colleagues from biology, geography, and urban planning come together around this theme. We're also organized in ascending order of the amount of hair, going from left to right. David is actually a net contributor to global warming because he sucks up heat, and I'm reflecting heat. So I told you about this demographic transition. Yes, there's a massive demographic transition, but just a few short years ago, the global human population became majority urban. 54% of the global population now lives in cities. By 2050, we're going to add another 2.5 billion people to cities. Now, billions are a big number. What does that mean? It means that 2 out of every 3 people will be living in cities this century. I mean, it's huge. Most of the people on this planet are going to experience this transition, this environmental sustainability transition, in an urban context. So, sure, cities are part of the problem. They have a huge ecological footprint, but they are also part of the solution. Think about how US cities rallied around COP and the climate agreement when there was a loss of leadership in Washington earlier this year. So we have this incredible opportunity to see cities as these complex adaptive systems that, although we can't control them in a way that we like to think about command and control, can we adapt them? Can we shift their trajectories to a more sustainable goal or horizon? I want to say that we have not just a single view on how cities will be or should be, or a very siloed perspective on that, but we also want to take cross-cutting perspectives and themes. And one of those key themes is urban resilience. Montreal, earlier this year in May, experienced horrendous floods. We can think of Hurricane Sandy. We can think of all the hurricanes that we've had this year in the US. There are extremes happening because of climate change, but there are also other forms of environmental extremes that are occurring in urban environments. So we need to think about urban systems. Yes, they're complex, but can they be resilient? Can they recover and rebound following stresses? So our vision, what's our collective vision of this? Well, we want to generate knowledge that's applicable, that is evidence and data-driven, that has the rigor of science, both social and natural sciences, behind it. The goal is to improve human well-being while making cities more resilient, socially inclusive, so we diminish those inequities that we see inevitably in cities, and that they are less environmentally impactful. And of course, we tend to think of cities as being impactful, but can we buffer that impact on the residents of cities by bringing in the natural environment? Can we create cities to be more hybrid? Can we improve human well-being by thinking about the mix of the built and the natural environment in our cities? So this leads me to the three grand themes that we have within this urban hub of research. Here you see them. To the left, we have the natural environment, the built environment, and governance. This is our first cut on what we think are the key initiatives, and we want to have, obviously, cross-cutting and cross-pollinating research going on between these three themes. Now, the natural environment, it seems like a strange thing to talk about in an urban project, right? But increasingly, people are realizing that natural spaces, ecosystems, are an essential part of human well-being in cities. That hasn't always been the case. But if we want cities that are going to buffer floods, mitigate urban heat extremes, then natural ecosystems like Montreal, which is just behind us, which is a vast green space in an urban environment, down to the smallest pocket of green space in your local park or the bioswale that's at the corner of your street, contributes to the well-being in a city. So the natural environment is an essential component and will be part of the key solutions as we move ahead. So the built environment. When we think about a city, the cities are incredibly complex mosaics of where people live, where we do industry, where we have businesses, and they're all intermingling and interconnected by transport systems. So every day, cities are moving fluxes of thousands and hundreds of thousands of individuals into and out of its center. That's a huge challenge, and we have to reconfigure our built environment. Many of our cities have legacies of past infrastructure plans. Are those current structures adapted? Many of them are maladapted, and many cities are rebuilding, just like Montreal. And we need to do that in a smart way that builds into account the long view, the sustainability view for cities. And then governance. So governance, I mean, cities are a remarkable thing. They're at the threshold, they stand across multiple jurisdictions between the state and civil society, between the natural environment and the built environment, right? And so that's an incredible opportunity to change how we govern. As we go from, if we decentralize to more polycentric notions of governance, where we try to tackle issues more regionally, more locally, more spatially, in a way that reflects the dynamics of cities. Of course, there will be, as we change how we govern cities as complex adaptive systems, that means there will be winners and losers. By definition, we'll be winners and losers. So it becomes a political problem. And so we have to think about the politics and the policies that go with the governance. And as we bootstrap our cities to the future, we have to change all these things simultaneously. So I will hand over the floor to David, who will talk about the projects that we've initiated that allow the crosstalk between our major themes.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. what I'm going to do is give you a little rundown of the 3 projects that we've identified as the opportunities for the adapting urban environments for the future hub here. And before I talk about the projects themselves, I want to give you a little bit of an idea of the philosophy and the orientation that we brought to bear to decide what to focus our limited attention and resources on. The first thing is that we very cognizant as urban researchers of the fact that urban systems are multi-scalar. What happens in the city is intimately connected to suburban fringes of cities, to regional landscapes and hinterlands, and in fact to entire global networks, both social, economic, and natural. Just thinking about the fact that the power that we rely on in Montreal is drawn from a large hydroelectric landscape that stretches thousands of kilometers. And every time someone gets in their car, unless it's a Tesla, they're relying on enormous operational landscapes which extract oil from across the globe, process it in other sites, and bring it to our cities. So with that perspective in mind, we wanted to identify projects that spanned a range of scales, from a local city and its metropolitan region, all the way up to the global scale as a scale of urban analysis. Secondly, we wanted projects which spanned a range of sites, starting with right here in Montreal, but making sure that we were kind of oriented to the rest of the world. So among our 3 projects, we want to choose some that were where there's a lot of local expertise being brought to bear on local issues, to projects where people can really think big and think big in a kind of globally distributed fashion. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that the projects we identified offered a range of possible knowledge and kind of social impact outcomes, which is to say that we wanted to make sure that we had some projects where we already had people in place who had identified problems and had identified ways to solve those problems, where we could see real, tangible, immediate impacts of the research. But at the same time, we wanted to offer room for more speculative, kind of blue sky outcomes, where we can identify important questions, but maybe we're not sure just yet how to answer those questions, or what the implications of those answers are likely to be 5, 10, 20, 50 years down the line. So we've chosen 3 projects which we hope do a good job of representing the diversity of these three factors, and I'm going to take you through them one by one. Project number 1 is that we want to develop Montreal as a living lab for urban sustainability research. What we want to do is create a node that connects research and policy about urban sustainability in the Montreal region. So to begin with, what that means is bringing together existing research at McGill and at other universities in the region, and also identify big opportunities for research that isn't being done yet in Montreal, but that could be. Beyond that, we also want to engage with existing policy initiatives happening around urban sustainability questions in the Montreal region, such as the development of a green belt in Montreal, the Mayor's Resilient Montreal Working Group, the recent floods which happened earlier in the year, and the development of the REM transportation network. Our vision here is to create a real positive sum node that connects, that makes all sorts of individual research projects that are engaging with sustainability questions in the Montreal region, that makes each of those projects better than it would have been by allowing researchers and policymakers to share data, to share questions, and to share findings. And we think that Montreal is a really ideal spot for this kind of research. Obviously, we're all here, so that's got something that's easy about it. But at the same time, Montreal's an important international hub linking Anglophone and Francophone cultures in North America, in Europe, and Africa. It's home to over 60 international organizations, some of which have urban sustainability as a core mission, such as Future Earth. And it's also, Montreal is the first Canadian member of the 100 Resilient Cities Network, which is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. At the same time, Montreal is a medium-sized city with 4 million people, which places it in good company. Hundreds and hundreds of cities, and actually where most of the urban population lives around the world, is not in gigantic megaregions or in small towns, but in mid-sized cities like Montreal, which means that the kind of research and kind of findings we can develop here have a really good chance of being applicable and insightful in other contexts around the globe. Another interesting fact is that Montreal lies in the St. Lawrence River, as we know, which is one of the largest freshwater ecosystems in the world, and Montreal is embedded in a very rich and productive agricultural landscape, which exports agricultural products locally, nationally, and internationally. Finally, I'll just say that Montreal is a region that's experiencing already quite disruptive impacts of climate change. In fact, Montreal is projected to get, in some cases, about double the global average of global warming we're going to experience here, which means it's a very important site for studying the urban, the local, and the regional impacts of climate change. So what we want to do with the Living Lab is we want to, as I said, connect existing research, which is using Montreal and the Montreal region as a case, but make that research speak to each other in a more practical way. We also want to allow policymakers and the public to benefit from the insights that researchers are already developing, plus the insights that are still yet to come, which means one of our goals is to develop a dashboard of sustainability indicators, which could be publicly accessible and which could be used to help evidence-based policymaking on sustainability in the Montreal region. We think that McGill's already got a ton of capacity and expertise to look at issues related to food, waste management, transportation, extreme weather, governance, land use changes, and development patterns and equity. And we really look forward to building that expertise by involving more researchers at McGill and also at other universities around the Montreal region. Our second project, which kind of expands the scale of analysis a little bit from the local in Montreal to the national, is the Panama Research and Integrated Sustainability Model, or PRISM. And the idea here is to develop an integrated model of urban interactions with the regional hinterland. The project's going to use spatial modeling in combination with other research methods to create a plan for growth in the metropolitan area, which takes into account regional and national environmental, resource, and social impacts. And what's great about this project is that we've already got some really strong existing leadership in place. Brian Leung and Catherine Potvin from biology are currently leading the PRISM project, and they're taking advantage of really rich and growing connections between researchers at McGill and down in Panama, in the country and the city. Panama is a great location to try to develop this kind of integrated model because the metropolitan region is experiencing massive economic and population growth. It is a hub of international shipping traffic worldwide. Panama is a major site for global trade and logistics. And it also has a highly skewed wealth distribution, which means that there are major inequality and social implications for how growth is managed in both economic and environmental terms. To address these complex issues, PRISM is going to apply a range of approaches, including cutting-edge models for land use, hydrological models, as well as whole country economic models. We're going to use GIS mapping, experiments and field studies, stakeholder interviews, and participatory approaches, which will integrate traditional ecological knowledges. Now, our final project that I want to tell you about is the one where we've allowed ourselves to be the most speculative and kind of dream big dreams. And it's called Sustainable Growth on an Urban Planet. And this project is motivated by the idea that Andy already brought up, which is that the planet is currently undergoing a one-time urban transition. And one way to think about it is that over the next century, the number of people who are living in cities is going to triple. And almost all of that growth is going to be occurring in the Global South. Now, the thing is, because urban infrastructure is so long-lasting, how urban growth occurs and is managed over this next 100 years is going to set the script for actually hundreds of years of human interactions with the planet and with the natural environment. You know, we're living in Montreal with decisions that were made as far as our transportation system, as far as our built environment, the form of our buildings, that were made 100 years, 200 years ago. And the same is going to be true going forward, which means we've got this one-time opportunity to really understand the sustainability implications of the current models of urban growth, which are unfolding in sites across the planet, as well as the implications of possible new ways to think about how we can manage and steer urban growth in more environmentally sustainable ways. Particularly what we're interested in looking at is the growth of new cities in the Global South, particularly in East Asia, which are kind of created out of whole cloth almost, usually in the fringe of existing metropolitan areas, as well as the more kind of organic growth and sprawl of existing metropolitan regions. So what we'd like to do is allow ourselves and researchers the opportunity to really consider and reconsider the theoretical basis of how we understand urban sustainability in the context of urban growth worldwide. We want to identify different typologies of urban growth and sustainability outcomes, and we want new methods for measuring and characterizing urban metabolisms in these contexts. So those are the three projects that we've identified. These are still very much in formation. One thing I want to say is that tomorrow morning, as many of you hopefully are already aware, we're going to be hosting a kickoff workshop from 9:30 through lunch, where we're going to bring together a set of researchers who want to contribute to this project and really try to kind of nail down in some fine detail how these projects are all going to evolve over the next several years. we want to make sure that we are creating knowledge that has real social impact, both in terms of urban policy making and also in terms of public understanding of how cities relate to the natural environment. And our long-term goal is that we think that we can really mobilize and expand the capacity for urban sustainability research at McGill so that we can create a multi-university strategic research cluster on urban sustainability, which can be FRQ funded by 2019. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all three themes for giving their overview over their conceptual creation of the themes. I would now like to open the floor for questions. There's two logistical things. First of all, please use the microphone because otherwise McDonald campus will not be able to hear you. And I hear that's not relevant anymore. Are they online though? Can I tell them the Twitter not working? It's 2017, we're still working out the logistics, not connecting the world, but just simply connecting two campuses in the city, it seems. So I invite you to ask either global questions that might be answered by one of them or very specific questions to any of the themes. Yes, please.
Hi. I have a question regarding the materials for sustainability, and the moment that you look at the materials and if they can be harmful, or I think would have to be looked at with the view that if we don't adopt these materials, something worse will happen. And I'll give you an example. Some people think, for example, gallium nitride or lithium-ion batteries might be a bad thing because the material itself might be toxic, but the energy systems based on energy storage and renewable energy with PV panels would be hugely beneficial for the Earth, right, for society. So I'm just trying to find, there's got to be links to assess the usefulness versus the pros and cons, usefulness versus toxicity versus risk. Thank you.
Benoit, you're absolutely right. There is that issue. We try to have renewable energy to store it, electric cars and so on. And there is the issue of what we generate in terms of waste and or the resources and so on. We need a sustainable approach. There will be always a compromise at the end, but to minimize from the design point of view, starting point, this impact that will come with the disposal of all this renewable technology and energy storage materials and so on.
Yeah, I think there are two ways to answer your question. The first one is to try to never use one material in absence of the context and comparison with meaningful other materials. And that's what we're going to try to do via using life cycle analysis approaches so that you can actually integrate, as you said, toxicity versus usefulness for other aspects of the life cycle assessment. The second way to actually answer your question as well is, you know, the toxicity of the atomic or molecular toxicity of some materials may be very different from the actual toxicity of the materials themselves. And this is still a very emerging research field as well. So there is contribution that needs to be done in that respect as well. So in other terms, the material you mentioned, we actually don't know very well how toxic they are and what happens to them if they are in such a context or such another context. So I think that what we're trying to do is to tackle both these issues. So work in a systems approach with LCA and also try to understand better the actual risk associated with emerging materials.
Yes, there's a question in the back.
Just a practical question. Coming from the School of Architecture.
Could you repeat when the microphone is there? Thank you.
It's a very practical question about getting involved. We've got some students from the School of Architecture here. We've got a whole school of 300 students and faculty who do almost nothing except work on urban environments. How can we best get involved in this initiative, both from a faculty level and a student level, We've got all kinds of projects that seem like they would fit really well, especially in the city's theme.
Thanks a lot for the question. On behalf of the Urban Environments team here, as I said, we're having a workshop tomorrow where we've invited as many people as the mailing list had on it to come and try to contribute. So that's step one. But this is, we're at the very beginning stages of what's going to be a multi-year process. So I think the best thing is come talk to us and let's talk about it, because I think, right now there's nothing but opportunity, really.
I don't think many people do know about it yet, so I'll make sure I sort of spread the word, and however best that can happen, just to make sure that everyone gets connected, that would be great.
Terrific.
So definitely tap into the school there, because you've got just an incredible resource of research going on there on the topic.
There's a question.
Hi, it's kind of a follow-up question to that. Do you have a unified communications strategy to kind of get this kind of stuff out to both the university audience and a general audience?
So communication is crucial in this, and we're working on this. First of all, we have set up a new website. What all of these themes were told in the beginning, and we'll get clear instructions, is that they will need to report and communicate regularly. How exactly that will be done in form of blogs, in terms of communications, that will be worked out, but that will be one of the crucial aspects of all of this, to first of all allow the community to actually contact and get involved, but second of all to report on the impact that this will be having. So more information will be forthcoming on that, absolutely. One question here.
Hi, I was just wondering, what do you see as the role, one of the big, kind of very popular predictions about the future of urban development is the sorry. So smart cities, what do you see their role in the future of urban development and sustainability?
Great, thanks for the question. It kind of goes back to what David was saying. That's something that I think we'll talk about tomorrow when we're getting a group of people together to discuss what are some future directions. I mean, I think that definitely is a direction the cities are going with, all this big data, all this sort of, everything's tracked, everything, there's all this remote sensing, there's all these sources of data. We're definitely hoping to take advantage of those things, but in terms of, I think to directly address your question, I think, that's the kind of thing we're interested in getting input on in terms of how that could be turned into a research question or a research agenda here. What is the role of smart cities in urban sustainability? And that's definitely something we're hoping to examine.
Yeah, I would just add to that, there are opportunities to think about, how do we instrument cities that are not smart from the get-go, right? How do we, for a city like Montreal, what kind of use is there for sensors to help us guide the future of that city? And a city, data is only so good as, data is not knowledge. It's only as good as the inferential frameworks that you have in place to interpret the results, and we would like to think that there is much more work to be done on that. As a biologist, the natural living environment is also a sensor, right? We can now scan the genomic sequence of bacteria, and we can get almost on a daily basis the changes that are going on within a city. So a lot of what we want to do with the Living Lab is taking data streams, interpreting them, and being able to bounce back that information so that the public and academic environment can take on the challenge of interpreting those data and using them in the right way.
So thank you very much for the questions. In the interest of time, we have to move on, but I'm going to put you on the spot now with the last question of mine, and I give each team 10 seconds to answer. What will be the single most important thing you think, or activity that your theme will be doing that you wouldn't be able to do with an FRQ&T strategic or answer or other conventional research grant? Why do you think this might be a unique opportunity? 10 seconds.
All right, well, for us, I think we'd say our Living Lab, Montreal Living Lab idea, that it's an opportunity to really draw together researchers across the McGill community, but also to reach outside the boundaries, to create something that's really positive sum that I think wouldn't otherwise be able to exist.
Citizen engagement as well, yeah.
Yep. Next team.
Yeah, for us, I think it would be to be in developing a new material we know is going to be inherently safe, and to also think about the future in a regulatory framework, acceptance from company, and making sure that we can launch that product.
And the third one?
For us, I think, at least what came to mind for me was being able to galvanize the research community at McGill. So taking expertise that exists here, and then being able to use that energy in a really nimble and creative way that we wouldn't be able to do if we had a lot more reporting requirements. That would be incumbent.
So just want to add to that. Okay, it's about knowledge gaps, and there have been several knowledge gaps which we haven't taken into account. You do climate modeling to understand the Earth and how it's going to evolve. This is something that's extremely important. So far, we have just focused on the physics of it, and some people have started looking at other aspects, biogeochemistry, etc. Human dimensions have not been looked at, social sciences, etc. So I think MSSI is just providing that platform for us to work together to work towards a sustainable future.
Thank you. So now to conclude, I would like to invite you to join me in thanking the entire group of presenters for their presentations this afternoon.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Neisel. I'm Dean of the Faculty of Engineering here at McGill. I couldn't think of a better talk to set the stage for what we're launching into right now in the McGill Sustainability Systems Initiative. We heard a lot today in our presentations about the world, humanity, nature, the globe being at a point of major transition. I have to say, I think McGill too is at that point. So here we are heading into our 200th year. I think we need to start thinking about what we want to be as an institution for the next 100, 200 years and beyond. And I think what we've done is we've managed to do a lot as an institution, building on, I guess you want to say, the kind of the monastic approach to scholarly education. And I think it's time maybe to break the church and take it in a very different direction. The MSSI as an initiative is, I think, one of those processes where we're trying to do something very, very different. The focus of this process happens to be on sustainability, which is a very good focus because of the future implications of this, of the many pressing issues to the world. But I think also it could set the stage for a very different way of doing many different forms of research across the entire university. The MSSI, while we've chosen a number of themes that will be our focal point for the next few years, that's only the first stage. There are other projects, other themes that will be funded over the course of the coming years. But we want to sustain something into the longer future. What we want to do is set a new stage for collaboration among disciplines. We want to break down the silos. I guess in my experience now in 25 years at McGill, I see over and over and over the many drivers that there are that force us back. No matter how much we try to break out of our silos, they try to force us back. And I think an initiative like this one is intended to break us out of those silos. What that means is that MSSI is a process which raises a lot more questions than provides answers. So I'd say what we're heading into right now is a period of experimentation, one where I guess you've now seen 3 different groups of people who are leading in an effort and trying to engage a much broader group of people, a constituency from across McGill, as well as collaborators from outside this institution in addressing some very pivotal problems. But notice we don't quite know yet how that's going to unfold. This is an experiment, and we ask that you be part of that experiment. We want to learn from it. We want to learn from our successes, but just as much we want to learn from our failures as well. And so it's very important that we start to connect not only within the theme areas themselves, but across them, and then share our findings with the rest of the community out there. And I don't just mean the McGill community. So in that sense, I guess it's a plea to all of you from all the different disciplines that there are, not just professors. I love the fact that we got the question from the School of Architecture to say, how can we be part of this? Because that's exactly what we need. We need person power, brain power, motivation, and energy. One of my favorite students who was focused on sustainability at McGill years ago said to me, as we were putting together the Sustainability Projects Fund, he said, Jim, do not forget, your most renewable resource at McGill are your students. And it's true. There's an energy there in the people that come through our doors and get pushed out the back end with their degrees that we need to capitalize on. So get involved, and I guess going back to the quote from Barack Obama, all hands on deck, there's a lot that we can do. That being said, I also want to say that this has been a big effort. Heather has had difficulty getting 3 deans to actually cooperate. We have a variety of different agendas, not just our calendar agendas, but other agendas as well. So getting us to work together, I think, is in itself a monumental task, but it's one that we're all absolutely committed to. That being said, so we owe a debt of thanks, one, to Heather for all the efforts she's put behind us to bring us to this stage, and of course there's a lot more work to go from here. But I also want to acknowledge the valuable contributions of people who made this an event in itself possible. So just by name, I'll mention Sarah Wilson, who's a research associate, Teresa Changsang, an administrative assistant, some work study students, including Shabir Abdul Hamid, Lina Gandour, and Ren Donestad, and then volunteers in downtown, including Leo, Kitty, Aditya, and at the Mac campus, Alex and Ya. I also want to mention specifically Alessandro at the MSSU and the communications team. This, again, is only the first of many, many events over the coming years. We ask you to keep getting involved in them. Our next invited speaker will make a presentation on Thursday, October 26th, and we will communicate more information to you as we approach that date. Please join us on our online platform, the MSSI, but also watch for any details, information that flows your way, and please take advantage of the numerous events, workshops, and other things that are just intended to build bridges across our disciplines. So thanks very much, and enjoy mingling together this afternoon. Thanks.